Well, good morning and welcome back to Grace Fellowship for week 2 of Throwing Shade, which had already disappeared, but here we go. So last week we talked about the things that you say. We talked about how they're used, how they interact with other people. We've talked about how that kind of goes back and forth in a give and take between these are the things that I want to say and these are the things that I truly think and these are the things that I know God wants me to say. And I told you guys last week that this is one of those squirming sermons, one of those things where for some of you it might hit a little bit closer to home. And that's probably a good thing, because if you're squirming around a little bit and you're kind of fighting back and forth against it a little, maybe it means that there's something in your life that you need to investigate. So once again, my name is Matt Plott. I'm glad you guys are here. Thank you so much. Whether you're joining us online or you're joining us in person, we're glad to have you here as a part of our service today. Now, with that being said, the next slide I'm going to show you might be why you're not glad to be here and a part of service today, because this is our topic, anger. And this is our topic because it's something that everyone deals with at one time or another. It's something that we all kind of work through and that we're all kind of facing and we're all kind of trying to stare down at one thing or another, especially right now in a culture that seems to be more and more and more angry about absolutely everything. So, I'm going to start with a deeply personal question, and I'm not going to be immune from it. I'm going to answer it myself as well. I'm going to actually ask you guys to raise hands on this one. I don't know that you will, but we're going to ask anyway. Who here has a temper? Show of hands. I see a couple people with both hands up, so that is awesome. Thank you so much for your honesty this morning. I'm one of those people as well. I'm a person that grew up, I was diagnosed really young with ADHD, and if you've got anyone in your life that has ADHD, you know that they kind of fly off from time to time. And when I say fly off, I mean kind of like this fly off. I mean, it's pretty close. Now, some of you are looking at that and you're like, who is the guy with the weird eyes? Maybe a more modern version of the Incredible Hulk would help you just a little bit more. But that's what it sometimes feels like. And it's not just people like me that experience that. There are some people here that you think through and you look at your daily life and you're like, man, I flew off the handle about that and I really don't have any idea why. Now, here's the thing about church. This is my personal belief. If the church is unwilling to talk about it, how can anyone ever fix it? That is something that is a core belief of mine. If we're legitimately trying to help people live a Jesus-centered life, that means we have to be willing to talk about the hard stuff. Amen? Yes, so that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be looking at this, and we're going to be seeing that there are times in Scripture, there are times in the Bible where there have been different people who have gotten angry, but God's been okay with it because God has been angry about the same thing. We're going to take a look at a little bit of that, and then we're going to take a look a little bit at what happened with Jesus, and then we're going to look at our own personal lives and kind of see how those things mesh. So, I want to start with something simple. What is the win in each of us being less angry? Jesus followers would start to look a lot less like the world around us. That is a key thing. If you don't get anything else from anything that I say this morning, please get that. Because we are living in a culture and we are living in a time where it is really hard to differentiate between a person who says they follow Jesus and a person who's never ever gone to church, never opened a Bible, never had a relationship with God. Because everybody's angry about everything. Some of it is justifiable. Some of it is absolutely justifiable. But how you address it and how you conduct yourself is super important in understanding that. So, we're going to take a look at the book of Exodus this morning. That's in the first half of your Bible. It's in the part we call the Old Testament. If you want to go ahead and turn there, it's going to be Exodus chapter 2, starting at verse 11. And we're going to be talking about a guy named Moses. Now, maybe you're familiar with that name, maybe you're not. Moses' life was a fascinating one, to say the least. Basically, he was raised by the daughter of the Pharaoh, but he was actually an Israelite. So he's going to be kind of going up and growing in the palace with the Pharaoh, while all of his people, all of the other Jewish people of the time, are all in slavery. So we're going to take a look starting at chapter 2, verse 11. So this is after Moses had grown up. So many years later, when Moses had grown up, he went out to visit his own people, the Hebrews, and he saw how hard they were forced to work. During his visit, he saw an Egyptian beating one of his fellow Hebrews. After looking in all directions, kind of doing one of these here, just to make sure that nobody sees what's going on, Moses killed the Egyptian and hid the body in the sand. The next day, when Moses went out to visit his people again, he saw two Hebrew men fighting. He's saying to them, "Why are you beating up your friend?" Moses said to the one who had started the fight. The man replied, "Who appointed you to be our prince and judge? Are you going to kill me as you killed that Egyptian yesterday?" Then Moses was afraid, thinking, "Everyone knows what I did." Now, I want to point a couple of things out here. Moses starts off looking at this situation saying, okay, so this guy is beating up this guy, and that's wrong. And I think we can all agree in that moment that that was a correct decision, that the thing that was happening at that moment was wrong, and it made him angry. He thought, this guy does not deserve to be beaten like this, potentially even killed. We don't know how far the beating was going, but we know that it was severe enough that Moses looked at it and said, I can't let this stand. That part we can potentially agree with. At that moment, he had options. He was basically the prince. He had options other than killing this guy. Now, all of the options that he may have had might not have been super. They might not have been things that would have allowed him to continue to live in the life of luxury that he was accustomed to. There may have been things that he could have said or could have done. We don't necessarily know what that would have looked like. But we know that he saw an injustice being perpetrated against this other individual, and he stopped it to the point of killing the Egyptian. Now, at this point, we know that he paused before. He kind of looked around, wanted to make sure, am I going to get caught for this? Is anybody going to see what's happening? Which gives the fact that it was premeditated. He knew what he was going to do next. He knew what that next step was going to look like. He wanted to make sure that he wasn't going to get caught. And then afterwards, after he killed him, after he hid the body, people knew about what happened. And I don't know why he would have necessarily thought it would be a secret. If somebody saves my life, I'm going to tell everyone, that dude saved me. He protected me. He saved me. He was awesome. That would be a big deal. It would be a big deal for any of us. So Moses ends up hearing about all of this other group of people is fighting. He goes in to try and break it up, and now he knows that news has spread. He's basically the grandson of the Pharaoh because he was adopted by the Pharaoh's daughter. So if you're looking at that, you're thinking, okay, well, what's this going to mean? How's this going to play out? Because he killed one of the Pharaoh's workers. He killed one of his generals. He killed one of the people responsible for continuing the work of everything that was being done. And realistically, whatever rules the Egyptians had in place, this guy would likely not have been beating the slave if it hadn't been for something that at the time was deemed to be inappropriate, unacceptable. Everyone kind of following along with that? So Moses knows that this is news now. This is something that has happened. And sure enough, Pharaoh heard what had happened, and he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in the land of Midian. When Moses arrived in Midian, he sat down beside a well. So think about this for a minute. With everything that went on, with everything that happened, even if Moses was justified in stopping the beating, there's still a consequence. There's still a consequence as a result of his actions. He flew off the handle because he saw an injustice. He went ahead, he took matters into his own hands. He decided to end the problem from happening, and now he's on the run. The guy that he would have called grandpa, whatever they would have said in Egyptian times, is now trying to kill him. This is an issue because what we're learning here is that his actions or his anger still brought up consequences. There are still things that played out because of what he had done, even if you say he was justified in what he had done to stop the beating. And it's important that we recognize that because God is still going to use Moses' story. He's still going to further how Moses can serve him, even though he has to deal with and live with the consequences of what came next. Why do I tell you that? I tell you that because as you look at the rest of what we discussed with Moses, it's important to recognize that God still used a man who had a temper. He flew off to the point where he killed a man. And that is important to recognize because there's so many things that come next in Moses' story. While he was in Midian, sitting next to that well, some young women came up to draw water. Moses fends them off from shepherds that are around. He helps them draw water. They take the water back home, and they bring it to their father. And their father says, "How did you get this water so quickly?" And they tell the story where Moses again defended somebody who needed defending. There was this man at the well, and he protected us, and he kept us safe, and he helped us draw water. And basically their dad says, "Bring him here. Bring him here so I can thank him. Bring him here. We will have a meal. We will have a feast together. Bring him in." He eventually marries one of those girls and starts a family. Moses is spending a lot of time in Midian and around Midian. Then he has what we collectively as Jesus followers know as the burning bush experience. We learn that God gives a directive to Moses as to what comes next. God chose Moses as the person who would lead his people out of captivity. And because God chose him to do this, Moses is tasked with a big problem. He's got to go back and stand before the now new Pharaoh. The other Pharaoh had died, but he stands before the new Pharaoh and demands for his people to be let go. But his people aren't out of the woods yet, even after they get released. They spend time wandering in the wilderness. They're trying to kind of follow where God has them going. He's trying to kind of lead them to follow God's will, and they mess up again and again and again. God calls Moses and he says, "I'm going to give you these instructions." If you've either ever heard this story before or you've watched the Charlton Heston movie, you know that this is the thing with the 10 Commandments. Where at this time, Moses is up on this mountaintop having this conversation with God, and God's giving him all of the things that need to be on these 10 Commandments. Moses comes up, the tablets are written, it says in the Bible, by the finger of God, so that they're etched and they have the instruction. But the people down below are kind of being knuckleheads because they end up saying there's all this scary stuff happening up on the mountaintop. There's thunder and lightning and clouds and fire and smoke, and we're down here and we're scared to death because our leader, Moses, the guy who led us out of where we were, he's up there and he's been there for 40 days. We don't even know anymore if he's alive up there. So they end up going to Aaron and saying, "Give us something to worship. Give us something to worship. Give us something that will bring us peace. Give us something that will bring us comfort. Give us something that will make us feel better." So they go and they collect gold and they make a calf. And they start praising and honoring and worshiping this golden calf for bringing them out of bondage. God, understandably, is not impressed with this, nor should he be. And we're going to pick the story up there in Exodus 32, verse 7. So if you want to go ahead and turn to Exodus 32, verse 7, we're going to see kind of how this plays out again. The Lord told Moses, "Quick, go down the mountain. Your people whom you brought from the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. How quickly they have turned away from the way I commanded them to live. They have melted down gold and made a calf, and they have bowed down and sacrificed to it. They are saying, 'These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt.' Then the Lord said, 'I have seen how stubborn and rebellious these people are. Now leave me alone so my fierce anger can blaze against them, and I will destroy them. Then I will make you, Moses, into a great nation.'" Several things to unpack there. First, we can recognize that the Israelites at the time made a huge mistake. They were scared. They started seeking out something in the midst of their fear to be able to put their faith into, and they chose incorrectly. Rather than staying true to God and waiting for Moses to come back down, they gave into their fear. We can recognize that that is a problem. And if God, the one who created you and the one who led you out of bondage and led you out of slavery and has been providing for all of your needs and everything that's happening during that time, looks down and sees that, he is understandably going to be furious that you're giving that credit to a golden calf that you made yourself. I think any of us can rationalize with God's frustration in that moment. I think we all could. Because if you've ever had kids and you've done things for them, it makes you frustrated when they get it wrong. I heard a pastor tell me one time, he said, I thought one time whenever I'd taken my child to McDonald's, we were sitting there and he had a thing of French fries on his plate and I didn't have anything to eat. So I reached over to his tray to grab a French fry and he slapped my hand to get me to not take his French fry. He said, I looked at that, he's like, and I thought for just a moment about the way God sometimes feels about us. He said, I bought those French fries. I gave you those French fries. If I want to walk up to that counter and make it rain French fries in this restaurant, I'm going to do it. I'll give them to everyone here, and I'll choose not to give them to you. He said God gave him that epiphany, as he phrased it, because in that moment, he was incredibly frustrated at the fact that something that he had blessed him with was now being denied to him. He said, that didn't make sense to me. He's like, it took me that moment to understand how God feels when we reject giving the things back to him that are rightfully his anyway. He said, not something you often get off of a $1 box of French fries. He's like, but it worked for me that day. Now, think about how God would have felt during this time. Choosing Moses, guiding him, giving him directions, sending the plagues in order to have Pharaoh let the people go, going through that process, and then having them worship this thing where they took all of their jewelry and they melted it down and made a calf, and they're burning sacrifices to it and praising this golden cow. He's looking at this and saying, who are you ungrateful people who aren't willing to thank me who actually did this? The anger and the frustration makes sense to us. We can relate to that. Moses, on the other hand, takes a completely different direction from the top of the mountain compared to what he does at the bottom of the mountain. Take a look at this. But Moses tried to pacify the Lord his God. "O Lord," he said, "why are you so angry with your own people whom you brought from the land of Egypt with such great power and such a strong hand? Why let the Egyptians say their God rescued them with the evil intention of slaughtering them in the mountains and wiping them from the face of the earth? Turn away from your fierce anger. Change your mind about this terrible disaster you have threatened against your people. Remember your servants Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You bound yourself with an oath to them, saying, I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars of heaven, and I will give them all this land that I have promised to your descendants, and they will possess it forever." So the Lord changed his mind about the terrible disaster that he had threatened to bring on his people. What does that say about Moses, that he was willing to stand there and intercede for his people in such a massive way? This same guy that we know already has a temper is standing there with basically facing off against God, saying, God, they're messing up. They're getting it wrong. I know you want to destroy them, but please don't. Please don't. What will it say about you? What will it say to future generations? Moses could have said, you've promised to make me great. You promised to make me great in this? Yeah, go ahead, kill him. I want to be great. I want to have power. I want to have authority. I want to have prestige. I want to be known. It would change the song Father Abraham to Father Moses like that. I mean, it really would, because at that moment, it would change everything if he had done that. Moses intercedes and says, God, just let's work with him here. Let's see if we can figure this out. Then Moses turned and went down the mountain. He held in his hands the 2 stone tablets inscribed with the terms of the covenant, and they were inscribed on both sides, front and back. The tablets were God's work. The words on them were written by God himself. When Joshua heard the boisterous noise of the people shouting below them, he exclaimed to Moses, "It sounds like a war in the camp." It sounds like war in the camp. But Moses replied, "No, it's not a shout of victory, nor the wailing of defeat. I hear the sound of a celebration." When they came near the camp, Moses saw the calf and the dancing and burned with anger. He threw the stone tablets to the ground, smashing them at the foot of the mountain. Now, when he was at the top of the mountain, whenever he was up in the presence of God, whenever he was thinking about the people down below, people that he had fought for, people that he had worked for, people that he had spent time with, people that he cared about, people that he knew, people that he loved, God, grant them mercy, grant them grace, grant them peace, grant them the ability to have this moment back. But when he gets down below and he sees exactly what they're doing, Moses too burns with anger. That temper that we see about the right things are right and the wrong things are wrong is again on full display here. And he is so mad, he grabs the tablet and smashes them on the ground. It's a little bit of a different attitude from the top of the mountain down to the bottom. As he was getting closer and closer and he heard the dancing and the singing and the celebrating, it became a thing where he's going down and he's getting closer and closer to seeing what they've actually done and getting more and more frustrated. He's got the mentality of this is wrong. It shouldn't be happening. And he gets frustrated and he throws the tablets and he smashes them. This is not the only other time that we see Moses act out in frustration with his people. We see it whenever he was told to speak to a rock to have it bring forth water, and instead he strikes it with his staff. The difference, there was a consequence for the tablets, which was you got to get new tablets, you got to bring them back up, I'm going to fill them out again, and you're going to treasure these ones. As opposed to striking the rock out of anger, where he was never allowed to set foot in the promised land as a result of it. There are consequences for your anger. There are consequences for your actions. God was furious at his people at that time. Now we end up looking at God today and we're like, well, that was the Old Testament God. The Old Testament God is different. The Old Testament God had anger issues. The Old Testament God had real anger management problems. That was the Old Testament God. The New Testament God, he wouldn't be like that. He's all about love and peace and rainbows and happiness. That's the New Testament God. Is it though, really? Because when you look at the same idea of this is wrong, it shouldn't be happening, you have to look no further than what Jesus did in the book of John whenever he goes in to clear out the temple. Now, if you're a Jesus follower, maybe you're hearing this and you're like, oh yeah, got it, I remember that story. But if you're not, we're going to take a look at it as well. So if you want to go ahead and turn to the New Testament, second half of the Bible, we're going to be taking a look at John chapter 2. If you don't want to turn there, it will be on the screen as well. It was nearly time for the Jewish Passover celebration, so Jesus went to Jerusalem. In the temple area, or in the courtyard around the temple, he saw merchants selling cattle, sheep, and doves for sacrifices. He also saw dealers at tables exchanging foreign money. Now, this was not uncommon at the time. To give you a little bit of background, whenever you would go to offer your sacrifice at the temple, you are sometimes traveling a really long way. We could be talking 4 or 5 days on foot to get to the temple. You're not going to bring a goat or a lamb or anything like that with you for that journey. You're going to leave your area, you're going to go to the temple, you're going to exchange your money into the money that you need to spend there, and then you're going to pay to buy the item that you're going to sacrifice on site. That's important to know in this. The problem is, there's a difference between doing something respectfully in the area that God has deemed necessary to do this kind of thing, and doing it in a way to make profit, being disrespectful, not caring about the things that are happening around you. Case in point, if we brought in 105 kids into this room right now, and they were dancing and singing songs about God and praising and worshiping, they had their hands in the air, and one of them accidentally breaks something expensive, complete accident, we're going to forgive that because it happened by accident in the midst of praying and praising and worshiping. We wouldn't be worried about it. But you bring that same 105 kids into this room, and they're running around like crazy. They're throwing balls, stuff's being hit in the air and tossed and thrown, and something gets broken in the midst of that disrespect. You're going to look at it in a different light because they weren't just not respecting the area, they simply don't care about what's happening in the room. Those are two very different things. And I use that example because that's the same thing that's happening here. That's not that it was a sin to exchange their money and let them purchase their sacrifice there. That part was okay. But the disrespect and the deceit that came from their business practices, that was a problem. So again, we talk about premeditation. Take a look at this. Verse 15. Jesus made a whip from some ropes and chased them out of the temple. Let's pause there for a minute. How long would it take you to make a whip? I mean, really, think about that for a minute. Jesus walks in, he gets angry, he gets frustrated, and rather than immediately flying off the handle, he says, hang on a minute, comes over, takes some rope, and starts fashioning it into a whip because he knows he's going to have to chase these guys out of here. So he fashions it into a whip and chased them all out of the temple. He drove out the sheep and cattle, scattered the money changers' coins all over the floor, and turned over their tables. If someone walked into church this morning, came up here and said, you guys are crazy, and flipped a pew up in the air, we'd be like, what is going on here right now? We would be completely taken aback by it, as were the religious leaders of the day. But here's what Jesus does next. Going over to the people who sold the doves, he told them, get these things out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a marketplace. He didn't want them making money off the backs of the people who were coming in to offer sacrifices. It's one thing to bring in the money, to exchange it into whatever it needs to be, and then to turn it over without making any profit, either for the money changer or for the person selling the animal, but to use those things to make a profit and to break the backs of the people who are coming in to be obedient to God. He was angry. And again, justifiably so. But we have to ask for each of us, what does this mean for our anger? What does it mean for all of the things that we are dealing with? Are we justified in being angry? Here's the part where this hits a little closer to home. Here's the part where you might start squirming a little bit to hear this. If you're looking at the things that you're frustrated by, and I'm going to go there, if if you're looking at mask mandates, if you're looking at vaccines, if you're looking at abortion, if you're looking at same-sex marriage, if you're looking at transgender issues, if you're looking at any of these things and you're saying, I'm angry about how some of this stuff is playing out, if it's something that makes God angry, your anger is justified. But you really have to check your heart here. You really, really have to check your heart here. And I say that because you don't always reflect what God thinks just because you think you're right. And that is so very important to note the difference on. Because as a follower of Jesus, if our only response is anger, we are getting it wrong. If I drive past an abortion clinic and I see a young woman who's pregnant walking into the building, my heart is going to break. I'm going to be shattered to see that. I'll be disappointed that that's the direction that she took. I'll be disappointed that that's the choice that she's making. Am I going to be angry? No. I'm going to be devastated. It's going to wreck me. It's going to tear me apart. And that is acceptable. To say I am so mad at that person because of what they're doing, no. I might be mad at the decision, sure. Mad at the circumstance, absolutely. But there's a difference between being mad at a circumstance and being mad at a person. And we have to be willing to recognize that. I'm going to share with you guys a quote that might help bring this home a little bit more. When the things that break God's heart are breaking our hearts too, it simply means that we are becoming more like Him. I don't know who this quote came from. If one of you does, let me know after. But this is true. If the things that are happening in your life and happening in the lives of the people around you are legitimately making you cry when you see it happening in our world, it means that your heart is more like God's. But here's the problem. We've taken this mentality and we've applied it to anger. When the things that make God angry are making you angry too, you are becoming more like Him. We've taken that idea and said, well, those two things are equal. Those two things work together. Those two things make sense. Because if I'm trying to be more like God and God has anger over something, clearly I'm allowed to have it too. In some cases, yes. In some cases, that is absolutely the truth. But you have to be willing to check your heart. Because Paul puts it like this. You guys don't have to turn here. It's going to be up on the screen. Since you have heard about Jesus and have learned the truth that comes from Him, throw off your old sinful nature and your former way of life, which is corrupted by lust and deception. Instead, let the Spirit renew your thoughts and attitudes. Put on your new nature, created to be like God, truly righteous and holy. So stop telling lies. Let us tell our neighbors the truth, for we are all part of the same body. You could add in any other number of things of the stuff that we're supposed to stop doing as we're letting the Spirit transform our minds. Stop being angry. Stop being deceitful. Stop being hateful. Stop lying. Stop lusting. Stop doing all of these other nature of things. And for some of us, anger, it's the one that we just can't quite let go of. Maybe you're bitter about a past relationship. Maybe you're bitter about a current relationship. Maybe you're bitter about how your life played out. Maybe your job got shipped off and you're angry about that. Maybe you just drive, and while you're driving your car, someone cuts you off and nobody in your vehicle would believe you're a Christian with the things that come out of your mouth. It's possible. It happens to all of us. We're going to get angry. But there's a verse that I want to share that I didn't actually put in this, and I meant to, but I didn't think to do it. This is another Matt Plot paraphrase, so bear with that. That's the version we're using for this, is Matt Plot paraphrase. In your anger, do not sin. It doesn't say don't get angry. There's going to be times where you're going to get angry, and it's going to be a justifiable, righteous anger, and you're going to be right there on track with this is wrong, it shouldn't happen, it shouldn't have been like this. Big things, like September 11th, that is a righteous anger moment. Those people shouldn't have died. That's a righteous anger moment. But it's also a moment for your heart to break for what they were enduring. You look at things like I'd mentioned the abortion clinic. That's a time to say, my heart is breaking for the people that are involved in that in all areas. Am I angry that it's open? Yes. Am I angry that it's legal? Yes. Am I angry about all these other things surrounding it? Absolutely. Am I angry at the doctor that's in there who's willing to do it? Being angry at him versus being angry at his willingness are two separate things. It's hard to differentiate at times because for each one of us here, we get to a point where we get so angry and it kind of flies out of us and we hulk out about whatever we're thinking. And in the midst of that moment, we don't stop to differentiate between, am I angry about this circumstance or am I angry at this person? It's why when you think about the things that are happening in your life and you look at the people that you're surrounded by, you have to ask yourself some very hard questions. Why am I angry? What is the thing that's bothering me? Am I really, truly mad at the person that's in front of me? Or am I mad about something else? If any of you here are the ones that had a hand up with do I have a temper, includes me, we've got some work to do. We do. And you already know it. If you're a person in this room and you've got a bad temper, you know it. If you don't know it, ask your spouse. They will tell you. That's the way this whole thing plays out. But we don't have to let it continue to have a hold of us. We don't have to let it continue to be a part of our lives. Instead, let the Spirit renew your thoughts and attitudes. Put on your new nature, created to be like God, truly righteous and holy. How do we do that? How do we do that? Whenever we're looking through a situation and we're already frustrated and we're already on edge and we're already irritated and you're already at the point where you're at like a 9 out of a possible 7, that you're so angry already, how do you throttle it back down and calm yourself in the midst of that moment? There are lots of different guides and tips and tricks and self-helps and all of those types of things. I encourage you, if you are a person that deals with real anger issues, seek help. Talk to someone. Have that conversation. You already know if you're a person that kind of falls into that category where, you know, Matt, this isn't just I kind of fly off the handle whenever I get cut off in traffic. This is I get rage-induced, rage-filled. If that's you, seek help. If you're just sort of that former category where you're, you know what? I see dirty socks laying by the hamper when my husband should have put them in the hamper, and that drives me up the wall. If that's more your tipping point, if that's more your anger, that's one of the things where go to God. Let Him renew your spirit. Take that time. We're about to sing a song here in just a minute. I want to share with you some of the lyrics from it because this is so incredibly true. So when I'm fighting whatever is inside of me, anger, lust, addiction, rage, any of those things, when I fight, I'm going to fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Whenever you get to that part of this song, whenever you're at that moment, I'm going to ask the praise team to go ahead and come up if they would. But whenever you get to that part of the song, don't let it just be something that you just kind of ho-hum sing. Let that be something that you make a prayer for you today. That when you get to this area, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet, it's not just your fears this morning. It's your fears, your angers, your insecurities, the things that are in the back of your mind that are constantly wearing you down, stressing you out, and drawing you further and further from God with the things that you're thinking. We're going to sing that together today, but we're going to sing it as a prayer because it's something that each of us needs from time to time, is to be reminded that this isn't just us fighting this. If you're a Jesus follower, you've got a God standing behind you that dwarfs whatever is standing in front of you, and we need to keep that in mind. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. God, I want to thank you so much for being there for us. God, I know that this topic this morning for many of us here might be something that is really hard to hear as we're stepping back and we're really looking at ourselves. But God, why are we angry? God, help us focus on that this week. Give us direction, give us guidance, and God, more than anything else, give us your peace as we're trying to be more like you. Renew our hearts, renew our minds, and draw us closer to you every single day. God, if there are any people here that need to have a conversation, God, I ask that you put that on their heart today. God, we know that you can help guide us through this. We know that you can help provide us peace. God, that's what we're asking you for today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.